Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, AD and LeBron are getting impatient. Jared Vanderbilt is set to return. And oh, by the way, the Lakers kick off the second half of their season tonight against the Celtics. A lot going on. We'll get to it next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free, never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 27,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are buried in Lakers news right now because, man alive, was it a busy Wednesday here in Los Angeles as the Lakers are concerned. As I mentioned in the open, Jared Vanderbilt is set to return on Saturday, although JJ Redick is not 100% sure he's actually going to play in that game, but he'll be in uniform, barring setbacks. The Lakers are kicking off their second half of the season tonight against Boston. But the big news, I think, Shams reporting that LeBron and AD are starting to get a little worried that the team might not be able to improve. So do want to let people know as we get to all of these things. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So, I mean, for the second half to begin, Andy, it is good to finally get Jared Vanderbilt back. But it may, it's certainly none too soon because I guess the LeBron and AD are looking for reinforcements. Well,
Jared Vanderbilt, his return is essentially the same thing as a new free agent. So sure. In some ways, LeBron, AD, get off Pelinka's ass, man. Like, dude's working overtime. He's delivering you a new guy on Saturday. Like, respectfully, shut the hell up. Like, stop leaking stuff through Shams, man. Your boy Rob's doing the Lord's work in El Segundo, and all you guys are doing is bitching. And not even putting your names on it.
It is, we talked about this.
Cowards.
We talked about this for Wednesday's show and earlier in the week. Like, what do these comments that were made after which game? It was Clippers game? No margin for error.
It was the Clippers.
No margin for error. Talking about the roster as it's constructed, like, this is what we got. We've got no margin for error. And wondering, like, what are we talking about here? Is this a way for LeBron to be sending a message to the Lakers to do something here? And obviously, statements like that can mean more than one thing at once. But this, according to Shams, with the February 6th trade deadline a little more than 2 weeks away, league sources told ESPN that James and Davis are growing concerned by the Lakers' ability to make significant roster upgrades with their two tradable first-rounders. James, a four-time champion, and Davis, a one-time champ, have expressed that they want the franchise to make moves to contend for a championship, with the co-stars believing the Lakers are potentially a piece or two away. I will say this. I agree with them. I am also growing a little concerned about the Lakers' ability to make significant roster upgrades, but I've been there for a while.
Well, there's a couple interesting parts of this. There's the question of ability to do this, and that rests largely on what you think of the assets the Lakers have available, how much of a bidding war for anybody there's going to be around the league. I mean, short of Jimmy Butler and that situation, which is only getting uglier by the minute.
Suspended again on Wednesday.
But that situation is a mess. Jimmy wants everybody to be uncomfortable. He's made that very clear. But other than Jimmy Butler, you hear like a little soft chatter about is De'Aaron Fox still unhappy in Sacramento? A little bit of soft chatter. Could the Pelicans actually move Brandon Ingram? Like, is there a market for him? Like, there are questions about how robust a trade deadline this is going to be in the first place in terms of real movers and shakers, beyond how valuable around the league the Lakers' assets are or are not seen. But then there's also the question of the Lakers' willingness to do the maximum that they can with the assets that they have. the ability to do something and the willingness to do something are two very different things.
They are, and I actually doubt both. I mean, if we're getting into it, I think, yeah, sure. Could the Lakers pry away? Somebody that would report today the Lakers are kicking the tires again on Jeremy Grant and Robert Williams, which would require draft capital to go back. Like, okay, I mean, yeah, you can make an all-in trade where that is your return, but like, I'm not giving up first-round picks for Jeremy Grant. Would he help? I guess possibly, depending on what the other, which players in your rotation are coming back. But Jeremy Grant is not good enough and too old, quite frankly. He's the wrong side of 30 to be your all-in move.
It's interesting. It's interesting too, Brian, that you go there, because this part of Shams' report for ESPN is what actually caught my attention more than even the part about LeBron and AD, their temperature in terms of what may or may not happen with the Lakers. The quote, "The Lakers have done their due diligence engaging trade interest around the league and are open to using their tradable first-round picks for players who are a fit for this iteration of the Davis-James team, as well as several years to come," under Redick, sources said. And what I find interesting about that is it feels like we are getting back to, in my opinion, I don't think you're going to disagree, messaging that is meant to sound seriously aggressive and proactive until you start really dissecting what's actually being said. Because what is basically being put out there through Shams is the Lakers are aggressively open for business for this player as long as good enough to help right now in a big way, good enough to help several years down the line, let's say to like 2029 or 2030, plus presumably without including Austin Reeves.
And they don't seem to be particularly enamored with the idea of trading Dalton Connect either.
Right. That feels so specific in what you're looking for. That player arguably may not exist. And what you're actually doing, rather than laying out the terms of how aggressively you are looking to make a move, what you're actually doing is proactively messaging why you didn't, because mythical player X was not available for what you're putting out there as very aggressive, hard target search, when in reality, what you're doing is making it so impossible to meet the criteria that you don't actually make a move.
And I think there are a couple players, I'm just looking up his age to make sure I get it right. There are a couple guys who sort of fit loosely into this space, and they would cost, varying amounts. Like Cam Johnson is 29, as for all intents and purposes. He turns 29 in 4 weeks or something like that, 5 weeks. So yeah, I mean, he certainly has, with that style of play that he has, in theory, has a few years of decent play in front of him. He's hurt all the time and always has been. So I do wonder how well he'll age. Okay, so if you set him aside, and you don't think the Lakers are really in the Zach LaVine sweepstakes, both in part because of the contract and also just because it's a complicated deal for the Lakers to put together.
Particularly if you're not including Austin Reeves, then you have to start stacking up so much money that includes Jared Vanderbilt, who he's going to cost you at least one pick just for taking his contract, even if you're the Bulls offloading LaVine.
Or Kelly. So
dude hasn't played in a year.
There's one package that you can look at it and say, I think this qualifies for what Rob Pelinka is talking about. And I'll tell you what I think it is next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by TalkSpace. Therapy can be a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, help you communicate more effectively. I can attest to how much therapy has helped me and my family during a really difficult period. But finding the right therapist, fitting sessions into a busy schedule, it can be a real challenge. And that's where TalkSpace comes in. TalkSpace is the leading virtual therapy provider. It makes getting the help you need easier, accessible, more affordable. With TalkSpace, signing up is simple. You just match with a licensed therapist who fits your need, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, TalkSpace is covered by many insurance plans. That's a big deal. And for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener to this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with TalkSpace when you go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter the promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnNBA, enter that promo code SPACE, SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and to show your support for the show. That's TalkSpace.com/LockedOnNBA, promo code SPACE80.
So, quick reminder, the postcast with Dave Palais available after every game. So on game nights, you get double the Locked On Lakers content to dive into on the channel. And then, of course, the Locked On Lakers newsletter, which delivers all of that goodness straight to your inbox every day, along with a bunch of really good NBA analysis from around the channel. So the NBA channel, I should say. So our network. Sign up for it. Locked On NBA, click on Locked On Lakers. Just to make sure people understand, Andy, Jared Vanderbilt is set to return on Saturday. He is expected and has been cleared to play in that game as the Lakers start their road trip in San Francisco against the Warriors. JJ Redick, though, did not commit to how much time Vanderbilt would play or even if he would play at all. The moral of the story here is the Lakers are going to be, I think, very careful with Jared Vanderbilt, given how long of a layoff he had and how badly they need him to be healthy for the second half of the season.
JJ already said a couple weeks ago that when Vando did return, there would be a minutes limit. I did a quick reaction video earlier on Wednesday with just some instant thoughts with Vando. My guess, and it's purely a guess, but I think it's logical, probably about 10 to 15 minutes, 17 or 18 if he's really feeling good and he's really looking good. I would be very surprised if it was more than that.
For a couple weeks, I think.
Right.
Not just a game or two.
And for the time being, I think you can find a way to carve in those minutes. For what it's worth, I am guessing the first guy that will feel that squeeze is Dalton Connect, because I think it will be very easy to play Vando as a defensive guard. And then offensively, you just sort of put him where you want to put him. And he's more about the things you're asking him to do as opposed to specifically where he is on the floor or, running an offense or anything like that. I think depending on the matchup and how much size is directly needed, Jackson Hayes could find a few minutes squeezed as well. But I would look to Dalton first in terms of where the minutes are going to come for Vando. And from there, hopefully he looks good. He can start getting even more floor time because, frankly, they could use him.
So we'll see what happens with that. I had mentioned before the break that there's one package of players that are at least talked about as commonly available or potentially available or something like that. Again, beyond like the De'Aaron Fox stuff, because he's obviously a young player in his prime and very good despite some flaws. He's an excellent player. The only package that meets what Pelinka is sort of talking about, which is fits now, also on the timeline for Anthony Davis going forward, even when the LeBron era is over and all that, is Utah with Walker Kessler and Colin Sexton. That's it. That's the only one I can come up with. And, I've seen different deals floating around where the Lakers could acquire those two guys, giving up a fair size of their rotation. It would certainly cost some picks. They'd have to probably take the protection off the pick they already owe Utah. They might have to throw in Dalton Connect or something like that. But maybe that is something the Lakers could do. And let's just assume for a second that the Jazz would put those guys on the market and that they would trade them to the Lakers. I think they might trade Sexton. I do not think Walker Kessler is going to be traded, but let's pretend that he is. Is that the kind of deal that you think does it for the Lakers? You bring in not a great defensive player in Sexton, but certainly an excellent scorer that you could add, and he would be, he can break guys down off the dribble, add athleticism, stuff like that. And then a defensive difference maker in Kessler.
I am with you. I have never understood why the Jazz, even knowing they're going into like a full-on rebuild, they've been allowing themselves to be stripped for parts for a couple years, acknowledging they do have Lauri Markkanen and he's now kind of an odd fit for them or whatever. I have never understood why Walker Kessler would be traded, because he fits perfectly.
He's 23.
Right, he's 23. Like the idea of, well, you have to pay him. Like, so what? Who are you saving your cap space for in that free agency hotbed known as Salt Lake City? Like, nobody goes there anyway. If anything, in a lot of ways, if you lock up Kessler to a reasonable deal, he becomes more tradable. But the idea that he doesn't fit in what they do, or that they wouldn't want him in some respects, feels like a red flag to me. Maybe this is just Will Hardy's vision of what he wants from a center, or organizational vision. I get fine. I've just never quite understood it. Would Walker Kessler and to some degree Sexton fit that bill? I got to really know how JJ Redick feels about spending the majority of time with a true two big lineup. And I guess from there, what he thinks about LeBron spending a lot of time as a true wing, especially defensively, because the idea of giving up that type of capital for Kessler, if he only plays 20-ish minutes a night and rarely closes, that's a bad idea. Like, even if you like the idea of Kessler for the future, you're not maximizing Anthony Davis's prime in that scenario. So you got to really know that Redick would be committed to it. I'm not sure it puts him over the top anyway, but
no, I mean, let's say they trade.
But I'm just saying from a functionality standpoint, right. Is the juice worth the squeeze?
I think the deal I saw, and it might have been Trevor Lane at Lakers Nation who put it together. I think, the sort of hypothetical who says no kind of thing I looked at on
Right. It's not a rumor.
No, it's not a rumor. Do not aggregate it. But hey, this is a legal trade that would work. I mentioned some of the draft capital, and from the rotation, it would be Rui and Connect, I think, as sweetener. Like, hey, here's a good young player. And JHS and some guys just to make the money work. So you're not giving up a significant portion of your rotation, because in a world where you acquire Kessler and AD moves to the 4 far more often, LeBron's playing the 3 almost permanently, 3 in the 4 when AD goes out. Like, there's really nowhere for Rui to play.
Sure.
Not big minutes. So, okay, I get that. I don't think that's a bad trade. Unprotected pick. You get back a 23-year-old to replace the 23-year-old you're trading away. You give away one more first-round pick or something like that. Maybe you have to do 2 and you get something else back. I'm not sure. I don't think from a value standpoint that's crazy out of line. But, I don't know I don't think that makes them better than any of the teams they're chasing this year. And then you have to get back to the other question you were asking. Is that worth it for the Lakers to, quote unquote, go all in? I think for a 26-year-old and a 23-year-old, that's the best, that's a pretty decent thing because it leaves you some flexibility. But, I don't know. Can't say I'm wild about that trade. I do like Kessler's defensive impact, but what do you do with LeBron at the 3 that much?
Well, okay. Coming up next, we can mull over this scenario and any others more, but I think you've hit on something that actually complicates whatever the Lakers are going to do beyond whatever commitment they will actually make to any of this that I don't think necessarily gets talked about a lot. So we'll get into that coming up next. On Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. I love live events, whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about concerts, comedy shows, theater. One of the best memories I have in 2024 was seeing Hamilton on Broadway last April. Went with my wife and daughter. Loved the show. My daughter got to meet the entire cast afterwards. They were all really nice. She took a ton of selfies with them. It was just really fun. And Game Time has made it easier to get tickets to events like Hamilton with features like Game Time Picks that filters out all of the fluff and confusing verbiage and just shows you incredible deals on seats, which is all you want anyway. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at the checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
So before we get to your point, I will just, as you have to the walking through of these trade ideas, like LeBron as a small forward on a relatively permanent basis causes trouble defensively, but you're improving your back line behind him. And now your 2 is, you have would Sexton start in this?
No, I think Sexton comes off the bench because Austin and Sexton together defensively, I think basically replicates what you didn't like about Austin and D'Lo. And you need scoring punch off the bench, particularly if Rui's getting traded. So Sexton would come off the bench. You'd leave the backcourt as it is.
Okay.
At least that's the way I picture it.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that's fine. And so, maybe you could say like the difference between LeBron at the 3 really out on a wing, you can get away with that more if you have better backline protection with Kessler there, and then you still keep Christie as a pretty good perimeter defender with Reeves, and now, like you say, Sexton off the bench, essentially replicating what D'Lo gave you with just less point guarding because he's more of a scorer than a point guard.
The cynic would say LeBron, wherever you play him defensively, in a lot of ways, is a problem. So
if you can improve the rest of the defense,
it's kind of a wash no matter where you're putting him. So if you think Kessler at center is an overall net positive offensively, defensively, both, whatever, it's worth it because the defensive issues for LeBron are just baked in.
But also too, you are also, I think, assuming and working in the idea that in the playoffs, you're going to at least get a better version defensively of LeBron, not LeBron in his prime, but better than LeBron on game 53 in the regular season when he's got to measure his output over the course of the season. So
if you're not, then none of this is worth it anyway.
Right. No, 100%. But you can see none of to be fair to Rob, again, I don't think this is a real trade because I do not think Utah is going to trade Walker Kessler. I really don't think they're going to trade him to the Lakers. But when you sit and you start to talk these things through, and we haven't even gotten to the film study and this and that and whatever, you can make this work. It really depends, if you really believe that Kessler, based on how good he has been early in his career defensively, qualifies as a sort of foundational piece, because that's essentially what you're turning him into. And you really, like you say, have to believe that Walker Kessler and Anthony Davis work very well on both sides of the floor.
And that Redick will think they work to, like, from what we've seen off JJ Redick, and it's literally a half season sample size, like big picture for at least the hope of how long he will be the coach of the Lakers from their perspective. This is very, very small in the grand scheme of things. But based on these 41 games, JJ Redick is not naturally inclined to go with larger lineups. Maybe it changes. Maybe it changes with somebody of Walker Kessler's defensive utility and the issues that they've had. Maybe it changes because we've heard enough chirping over the years that this is what Anthony Davis wants, and sometimes you just need to make your players happy. Like, I don't know, maybe a bunch of different. They may tell JJ, "This is what you're doing."
Right. This is right. That's what the money is for.
Right. Figure it out.
But like, again, this is like the only scenario I could come up with that seems to satisfy the reported demands, if that's the right word, that they have around a trade. And it's really complicated. To me, the really tricky part becomes, what do you do if you can't, like Jimmy Butler, talent-wise, upgrades, let's just forget the mechanics of the deal, but like just adding somebody of Jimmy Butler's talent reinvested in giving a bleep again improves the Lakers. It is a terrible long-term or even near-term.
Well, he doesn't look. He doesn't fit the criteria of what was leaked to Shams anyway. So he's
right. But my point, right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, my point is, the really hard decision becomes for the Lakers is, we can make some sort of all-in deal that really helps us in the short term, but doesn't satisfy that long-term thing. I don't think they do it, and that's why I agree with you that what they're setting up is an environment where, sorry, we can't do any kind of significant.
Right, because logically, and this is something I've talked about before, in wanting to see them pick a definitive lane. And in some respects, I mean, I obviously care which lane they pick because it matters. But in some respects, I don't care which lane they pick as much as them just picking a lane. Because not picking a lane of any kind in a scenario where you have one superstar who's 40 and another one who's in the back end of his prime, that just makes no sense in terms of, are you trying to accomplish anything of note other than putting asses in seats and looking surface level relevant? Like, unless that is the goal, because that's the thing you're most scared of more than anything, is not seeming relevant as a franchise, or I guess the bottom line not being lucrative enough. Like, you have to pick a lane that is definitive for any of this to make sense. And the idea that, well, it's got to be a short and long-term fit, again, with a star that's 40, another one in the back end of its prime, that feels like willingly cutting off options that don't really make sense for what is very much a win now scenario.
Well, I mean,
by any objective measure. It's
the obvious. Of course, I mean, if you can make a good trade that, like, you get players that are like, well, great. Yes. That's the Anthony Davis trade. What do you do when the decision isn't obvious? When the choice is hard? It's not a hard choice to make a good trade for young players that you can build around, even if it costs you draft capital. That's not hard. I mean, it's risky. There's risk to every trade, but that is as simple and easy a trade as you can make in sports. The one that is fair with the amount that you have to give up, makes you better now, is good for the future. Like, okay, sure.
Well, that's why we've always said, like, Rob Pelinka, yes, he gets credit technically for making the Anthony Davis trade because he was the one on the Lakers side that oversaw it. And when you look at the things on his ledger, it happened under his watch. But it took no real navigation as a general manager, nor any imagination whatsoever to land on, you know what? Let's go get Anthony Davis in his prime, who, by the way, is trying to force his way here anyway.
Yeah, right.
Like that. You and I have never had a job like this. I'm not exaggerating when I say we could have pulled off that trade.
We could have. Call up David Griffin and you ask him, you just keep adding things until he says, yes. That was basically the construction of that trade.
More or less. That is it's a little more complicated than that.
You draw a line somewhere, you got your cap guy figuring stuff up, but basically, that's it.
But the idea of, again, player that has to be high impact now and in the future that would be worth the 2 firsts. And again, presumably, but this is the read they keep putting out there, doesn't include Austin Reeves, because you always hear like, well, they would need to be an all-star level player in order to include Reeves. And it's like, well, okay, except respectfully, Austin Reeves is not an all-star. Maybe he becomes one day, but for the time being, he's not even in that conversation. So, this player has to be all-star level in order to be worth Austin. Then you start getting into, okay, who's the all-star player that is either unhappy with his situation or his team knows they have no future? You start getting into windows that are and lanes that are so narrowly tailored, they feel intentional.
At the very least, it's convenient. And I would say Austin is not an all-star. He is an all-star of value relative to what he's paid. But he's on the all-star team of great contracts this year. Yes. But that's not being an all-star. Dollar per dollar basis. But then you're going to have to pay him at some point soon too. And I think if it's not intentional, it's convenient because it's also coming at a time. And look, none of this is to say what's right or wrong. That's not what we're talking about here, because it is, in fact, a bad idea to do something dumb in the name of going for it, or we're the Lakers and we don't settle on mediocrity. Don't do stupid things just because you feel like you have to make yourself look good, like you're taking advantage of the LeBron era. But that said, this is it's a challenging trade market anyway because of the new rules around the CBA. There aren't that many players out there that really are worth doing. A Levine trade is something you can talk your way through. But even if you decide, Zach Levine provide, athleticism, shot creation, all these, there's some stuff that he would help the Lakers with significantly based on how he's playing this year with Chicago. Getting him here is not easy to do.
You got to stack a lot of money.
You do a lot of stuff to make that work.
BI, maybe I could see him checking a lot of boxes, but then how much are you willing to pay him?
Is this a good idea, bad idea to decisions there? But I agree with you. It does set themselves up for preemptive, plausible deniability, where a version of that where you don't even have to get into the particulars. It's just look, we had to hold our, with something that is inarguable, look, we couldn't find the thing that satisfied this criteria that we really needed, but isn't the only avenue for fixing the team now to take advantage of what you have now. Locked on. I think the Lakers playing the Celtics tonight. Big game. And one that we will, of course, have plenty of coverage after the game. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 27,000 subscribers. Sign up for the newsletter, lockedondaily.com. Click on Locked on Lakers. We would certainly appreciate it. We'll see everyone after the game.